So you may think it's very hard to get lost in America, until you enter into the woods shrouded in a centuries-old myth of a vindictive witch, as we return to Forever Horror Month and delve into the Blair Witch Project. In October of 1994 in Burkittsville, Maryland, formerly known as Blair, a trio of student filmmakers set out to document the local legend of the Blair Witch, a woman who was banished in the late 18th century, only to return to supposedly haunt the nearby Black Hills. The residents tell of legends spanning generations through to the 1940s, when a man named Russ had slain several children and was believed to be under the influence of the Blair Witch. Once Heather, Mike, and Josh venture into the Black Hills forest and spend the night camping, they soon become inexplicably lost. As they attempt to find the way out of these desolate woods, they stumble across chilling ritualistic figures and unnatural occurrences. Morale deteriorates and psyches fray, while the blackness of night brings increasingly terrifying incidents, until one of them disappears without a trace. As they are drawn deeper into the woods, they realize that what they are filming now is not a legend, but their own descent into unimaginable horror. And a year later, their footage was found. So the Blair Witch Project, written, edited, and directed by Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, is a fictional, narrative found footage film that completely took the world by storm in 1999, based off of a brilliant viral marketing campaign, well before anyone really knew exactly what a viral marketing campaign was. It's such an interesting thing how this thing got developed, and kind of the genesis of the idea came up in 1993 when the two of them just kind of had this very good fascination about these old sort of documentaries about supernatural and paranormal type of stuff, including the Leonard hosted In Search Of series, which also got a revival in the 1990s, hosted by Michalak of X-Files fame, and now currently has a new revival hosted by Zachary Quinto, also the guy who followed up Leonard Nimoy as Spock in the Star Trek series. And the two of them developed this sort of 35-page screenplay, which is just kind of a rough outline of what they wanted to do with the whole thing, where all the dialogue would be kind of scripted and have these sort of rough sketches of what the characters would be like for the film, for the eventual actors kind of work off of to develop their characters and work off of the notes that they give them throughout the course of production to kind of have the story steer in the right directions and have the conflicts and the characters and the situations kind of develop in the sort of an improvised fashion. Very interesting type of thing. Just like it took a couple years, and they got hooked up with a couple of producers and created and established Haxant Films, which is something which was named off of a 1920s silent horror movie documentary. And so much the reason why there was such a long span of time from when they began casting the summer of 1996 to when they actually started filming in the fall of 1997 was because they wanted to make sure they got the right actors involved, because they're very upfront with their casting calls, stipulating we're going to be out in the woods for several days, you're going to have to camp out and deal with all these different situations in a very unconventional style production here. So they wanted to make sure they didn't have anyone who would flake out on them or kind of view as the production went along got a little too difficult for them. They wanted to find people that had the rough and tumble type of feel. They could make sure they could go out there and deal with the situations in the wilderness and have the right qualities as actors as well. So it took months for them to find the right actors, to audition everyone and find exactly who they wanted for it. And they landed on Heather Donahue, Michael C. Williams, and Joshua Leonard in this whole thing. And a very interesting type of way how they wanted to market the film meant that they had to use the actors' real names attached to the characters that they were portraying in the film. And so to kind of play with that sort of reality versus fiction type of thing, is this real, was this not real, had a very odd type of reaction, especially from Heather Donahue much later on, when after the film came out, and they had a lot of people with very strong reactions to what happened in the film, especially her character. They would come up to her randomly in certain places and have very, very intense type of reactions to her and stuff like that, and she made it very difficult for her, especially kind of disassociating herself from the role in the film and stuff like that, to find other acting gigs later on, where she kind of bounced around to a couple different low-end type of films for like the next 10 years, and decided to call it quits on acting, but she actually moved into growing medical marijuana and published a whole book on it. So she really kind of found another niche for herself and kind of built her own business off of that type of stuff. But Williams and Leonard never had that much of a problem with it overall over the course of time here, but such an interesting thing how they kind of progressed and kind of had a little bit of an adverse type of thing at the back end of how things went off with the reactions and the release of the film, stuff like that. But as they get the cast together for this film and start figuring out how they would end up doing the production out in the woods for 8 days in October 1997, had a very interesting way of how to set it up and all these different things, because they gave all the actors radio to work with and a GPS unit, kind of figuring out which way to go and how to direct them through the woods, as every single day they would be directed to certain coordinates. They'd go up to where they needed to be and they'd find notes for each one of their characters about what they need to kind of do to progress the story each day as their characters. And each day they would get new film reels to put into the 16mm camera, where they also had the High 8 camera, which is a little bit higher resolution than VHS, so it gave them a little bit more work with in that regard. But it's such an interesting thing how they just plotted that out. And sure, there were plenty of times where they got lost and they went off in the wrong directions, and they kind of had to have this sort of safe word or whatnot to kind of break character or whatnot in terms of taco. They kind of like, okay, filmmakers come in, hey, you guys need to be turning back around this way and going down that road or something like that, or that path, and kind of deal with that type of thing to kind of break it up and kind of like redirect the entire thing, what they need to do, whether it was in reality or just in terms of the story character type of stuff. And it's very kind of fascinating in the first act there when they go into the town of Burkittsville and start talking with the residents. They actually did hire a couple actors with specific exposition to give about the Blair Witch, like Kedward, Rustin Parr, different things like that to dull out the lore of the film, so it would make sure that all that stuff got in there. But actors actually kind of ran into just regular townsfolk, and they actually kind of had a lot of people kind of come up with just on the spot type of improvisational moments there, especially the lady with the kid in her arm. It just comes out of nowhere. She just puts all this stuff together and had just on the spot. It's all just completely out of nowhere. She had no prompting of anything except for them just walking around the camera asking questions. Lady did a fantastic job, not being an actor or anything like that. Did a wonderful job. Really bright spot early on in the film there. She did great. And just like, it's such the whole thing where the whole beginning of the film just kind of sets all these different things a little bit at the time. When you're first watching, you're not really aware of it. You're just kind of seeing like, okay, where's this kind of weird pseudo-documentary type of thing going? Where's the direction going for? So you're kind of sitting there waiting for things to happen. You're getting a little pieces of information. You don't really know that they're terribly important. But I like so much that a lot of the things that they do call back later on in the film. They start talking about the characters like Mary Brown, stuff like that. She was talking about all these different things with the rocks and the encounter with the Blair Witch. All these little things they had going on really do kind of set things up really nicely and how they kind of tie back in later on in the film. And interestingly, when the film premiered in January of 1999 at the Sundance Film Festival, and actually got picked up by Artisan Entertainment for $1.1 million and had these very strong critical reactions to the whole film, they actually, with Artisan, they wanted to change the ending of the film because they didn't understand it. So they went off back in the spring of 99 and reshot a couple little alternate endings to the whole film, but ultimately kept with the original ending when the directors went back and shot a setup scene with a person in town talking about the whole thing with Rustin Parr bringing the two kids down the basement. One stands in the corner while he kills the other one. They want to make sure they got that out and make sure that was explained up front in the film. So when you got to that, you understood thinking back to the whole thing. So very good type of stuff, how they're able to kind of mold the thing around as they got a little bit more reaction from it, a little bit more input. And of course the whole film had like hours and hours and hours of raw footage to kind of peel through and kind of chop down and try and figure out. So it took like 2 years for them to kind of get from 97 when they shot the whole thing to kind of like early 99 when they had basically a more kind of a exhibition cut for the whole thing, where they originally had like got it down to like 2.5 hours and they chopped it down even further. And there's kind of a bootleg version floating around with that much longer cut with a lot of additional scenes, stuff like that. And there's been random little deleted scenes that kind of popped up here and there, and like there was like this truncated down like Blockbuster exclusive videotape that got released at the time that has like extra 2 scenes at the end of it. and a few little things here and there that you could have gotten off like the old DVD-ROM web links, stuff like that. There's a lot of random deleted scenes that's never been collected on a proper release of the film, any kind of disc format or VHS, anything like that. But it's interesting how they just kind of be able to chop it down and form it up and kind of get it in the right way to make sure there was the most effective version of the film. And this thing just like, when it hit, after they got this wonderful website put up with all this sort of true crime type of stuff going on with it, thinking the whole thing was real, and they were kind of marketing it that type of way and kind of have it go off and just like show all this like crime scene photos and all these different things and all the lore of the Blair Witch plastered all over the website, which is still up to this very day by way of the filmmakers. They've kept it up after 20 years. Wonderful that they did that. But all that type of stuff with all the marketing buzz, all the early critic screenings, stuff like that, all the quotes all over the trailers, all these different things just got everyone so buzzed up about this whole film. Going into July of '99, this thing just burst through because it cost about $60,000 as a just base production budget, then a couple $100,000 tacked on top of it with the post-production and a couple more editing things, and certainly the marketing costs added into that. But even then, this thing became the most profitable independent feature ever released, grossing $246 million at the box office. This thing broke records. It just burst right through. And the critics are very strong about the whole film. They're very positive about the entire experience of the whole thing. So much so, just like there were so many people from Sundance onwards just had very intense reactions, very powerful type of things. They're just like, they were freaked out with the whole film. They thought it was brilliant. They were just very impressed. But so much the thing with a lot of the audience reactions were not quite as favorable. It was a very divisive type of film. A lot of people were not very much used to this type of thing because you had gotten like Cannibal Holocaust in 1980 as a sort of found footage. Then you had this little bitty type of independent film called The Last Broadcast that came out the year before this that pretty much just went to video in a certain way. And a lot of people had a certain thing with not knowing the production timeline of the Blair Witch Project thing, and they kind of aped off of Last Broadcast. But obviously that did not happen. That film was released after they had already shot Blair Witch, so they could not have been the case or whatnot. But this is the era of the post-Scream slasher films. Everything's high gloss, slick productions, pretty people in the whole film. It's a very different type of era, different type of setting for the horror genre at this point in time. And then this sort of different style of horror film that's all this grainy little 16mm high 8 type of film that's not set up with any type of thing that you'd be sort of used to in that type of way. So it's like it came off in a way where a lot of people just didn't get into it. It was too much of a slow burn. It was too different from them. They felt like it was kind of boring in some places. A lot of people kind of walked out of the theater feeling the film wasn't very interesting. They didn't even sit through the entire film in my screening. So it's like, it's such an interesting way of how the film just had very wide reactions to everything like that, and still made all that type of money. There's still people, you don't just make that kind of buzz off of this type of film without people actually really liking it and going back and re-experiencing it over and over again. And this thing just hit so strongly that it was out on DVD, VHS, and Laserdisc by October. Within like 2.5 months or so, this thing was out on video. They're just fast-tracking it so much. You gotta get it out for Halloween. And so much like those critics at the time walked into this film not really knowing exactly what to expect, but walking out of it with just this wave of terrifying emotions washing over them. And when I saw this thing, I was terrified like living hell. I'm still terrified like living hell watching this film and being invested in it and being enveloped into its atmosphere. This film is very, very effective at what it does. It never resorts to jump scares. This film is very well constructed in that type of way where you got this whole thing where like there's no music to accompany anything. It's not really a constructed sound design or stuff like that. It's like it's very raw type of stuff they put together for the whole film. There's no gloss to it. There's no interesting camera angles. Really kind of done in a sort of a typical sort of cinematic way. It's all stuff that it's almost happenstantial that you get certain very memorable type of shots in the whole film where they didn't have a lot of experience with the actors using cameras and doing all these type of things. Joshua Leonard had a little bit of something there, but even he had a moment in the whole film where they're up with his character of Mary Brown, who's giving this story about his encounter with the Blair Witch. That's very creepy and stuff like that, but the character's kind of strange in a certain way. And he's got the focus all wrong because he's got it on meters instead of inches, so everything's a little bit out of focus, but it works so well for the whole film where all these little things come off in such an authentic fashion. It doesn't feel like it's constructed any type of way. It doesn't feel like it's fabricated. It feels very real to sell that illusion they're trying to sell. And just like it comes off extremely well in that regard because these are good actors. These are very good actors. I don't think they ever truly got as much widespread appreciation for the quality of what they put into this film. One, they're very authentic and, again, not scripted. So these actors have to be very enveloped into what their characters are, with a few sort of real life sort of things getting in the way, where there's supposed to be a little bit more of a bonding or sorts between Heather and the character of Josh, where they end up, the actual actors kind of get a little bit more combative as the whole thing goes along, and they had to kind of adjust things in editing to make it not so much that, but there's still a lot of that in there. So it's a very interesting type of thing because, again, Heather Donahue does a fantastic job in this whole thing. I like so much the progression of her character in this whole thing because she does have that naivete in a certain way because she's kind of presenting this documentary in a little bit of a pretentious type of fashion, sort of self-importance or whatnot about what she's doing here. She thinks it's a lot more important than it actually is, but then you get a lot of these situations where they're kind of off the sort of documentary camera, this off the 16mm and onto the video camera, which is kind of like them shooting all their behind the scenes of how they're making it, the journey of doing it, where they're just kind of flipping about a lot of different things. They're flipping about Myrick and a few other people in this whole thing where they're interviewing them, they're not taking things seriously, and the character Heather just has that almost obsessive, driven, dedicated enthusiasm about this entire project. It's like, up to a certain point, it's like a coping mechanism. When they start getting into real frayed situations and things are getting very much at the wit's end of what they're dealing with, or continue on with the documentary is just a way to cope with the situation. And so much that great little piece of dialogue from the character of Josh there, where he's got the video camera looking at Heather and saying, like, I understand why you like looking through this thing. It's like a filtered reality. Nothing is exactly real when you're looking through this. You could kind of detach from what's happening if you keep looking through this lens. It's a very interesting way of pinpointing what she's doing, her psychology in the entire situation, again, without anyone having a script to kind of say these specific type of things. There's a certain way how they understand their characters and kind of comment about each one of them in this situation. But you see so much with her how she just carries this whole thing where she's trying to be the leader of the situation, trying to hold everything together without really knowing anything for certain about the situation. She doesn't know exactly where they're going. She doesn't know exactly how to get out of here. She doesn't know exactly what the hell's going on here. But it's the fact that these two got on this project trusting her, but what the situation was. Mike even says, I trusted you to bring me in here on a scouted situation. And so all these little things build up, and it's like so much on her to deal with this. And you can develop a sympathy for it as things kind of grow out in this whole film, how it just goes down into a deeper sense of hopelessness in a certain way. You just see her break down in the whole film in that just powerful confessional she has up to the camera there, where Heather Donahue was very, very self-conscious about that shot, where she wasn't really entirely aware that she was framing the shot with the camera up her nostrils. She's been very, very self-conscious of that over all this time and whatnot, but the acting in the whole moment is just phenomenal. What she does in that whole thing, the acting quality, she's able to focus the terror of the entire thing, the whole thing of, I'm too afraid to open my eyes, I'm too afraid to close them. It's just such a horrifying just moment of atmosphere in the whole thing. And she can scream like nobody's goddamn business either, just like her screams are fantastic in this film. Just spine-chilling to the nth degree. I think she does a wonderful type of job, and Joshua Leonard's the one kind of person in this entire cast that really just pushed on with a really strong acting career. He just kept pushing on, and he's still acting today. And he's a very damn good actor. He really puts a lot of good things in this character, where you see early on he shows up late to the whole thing, where the actual actor of Joshua Leonard was late to the shoot at the time they were supposed to shoot at the beginning of the film, so it's still kind of worked into the character in a certain way, where he's got this sort of antagonistic sort of relationship with Heather, where he's kind of prodding and stuff like that here and there at certain places, but I like so much when they get in the woods, at least up to a certain point, he is trying to be the sort of mediator between Mike's sort of just agonizing, agitated state and Heather's way of trying to keep things in line and trying to figure out a way to do things. He tries to mediate and trying to calm things down and deal with that type of thing, but even as things go on for him, he starts to get more afraid. He starts to just kind of break apart in a certain way. So it's like just nice to see how all these things kind of like how each character kind of goes back and forth in these situations about how they're trying to hold it together and then kind of fall apart and kind of have this combative type of thing going on between them and stuff like that. It's like there's all these different dynamics, all these emotions kind of bouncing between one another, which you could probably say is a little bit sort of inconsistent in a certain way, but it also is very realistic. You could definitely see, despite the fact, even though their regular personalities would kind of dictate a certain type of thing, you could definitely see after being lost in the woods for several days now, with basically nothing to eat and very little rest or whatnot, and having to keep walking for miles and miles every single day for hours on end, it doesn't matter what your regular personality is, you're going to get frustrated and exhausted, and you're going to get your wit's end whittled down to its bare end, stuff like that. So it's like, regardless of that, it's very realistic how these are portrayed, even if they do seem like they might not be as consistent if it was a fully scripted type of thing. I still like it because it brings out a genuine emotion and what the actor's going through to reflect the methodology of what the characters would also be going through regardless of anything else. So it's a very interesting way how to weave all that type of stuff and kind of figure out exactly what definitely works. But Leonard's a great thing, and Michael C. Williams also does good stuff. So it's like he's kind of the most sort of argumentative at the beginning of the whole film. He's kind of a smart ass in a certain way. The character is very much a smart ass. And you can kind of see that as he's probably like the one who gets pissed off about the situation the most earliest. But I like the progression you have with the character where he is kind of an asshole when he kicks the goddamn map into the creek because he can't read the fucking thing and thinks it's useless. But knowing that it's even just like the only possible thing to have as a guide to get the fuck out of there, you definitely see that type of thing that he does. It definitely shows and galvanizes his general attitude up front. But I like so much after Josh disappears in the film, you get this bond between Mike and Heather there. There's no more that yelling at one another or being argumentative or combative, stuff like that. They start to bond. I like so much when Mike kind of falls apart a little bit. He's doing that sort of sitting down, rocking back and forth type of thing, and just have this wonderful, beautiful character war moment where he just sets the camera down, just goes over there and just sits next to him and just gives him this embrace, stuff like that. So it's like, it's very strong character moment there that doesn't have to say anything, but you empathize with the characters in that moment. It's a very strong type of thing. Just like each one of these actors does a really solid job in this whole film, where I think they just have not gotten as much credit for that type of thing, seeing that it just is not this typical type of film to analyze in that regard. But they're good goddamn actors in this film, and they just nailed it so very well. You get very visceral sort of reactions out of what their situation is going through with these characters. I like so much how this stuff develops and how the terror begins to build up in this whole film. The atmosphere they weave in this whole film, just the darkness and different things they got going on with the sounds all around in the night and all these different things they put together in the whole film. The stick figures, they're fucking terrifying. Just like when they walk in this opening in the woods and just see all these things laying around. It's making me clench up right now talking about it. It's scary shit. It really does. I've got chills on me thinking about that moment in the film. And just like at night when all these different things start happening. Again, it's not an elaborate sound design in the film, but they knew exactly what to do. They did these little recordings beforehand with like children, the sound of the children, whatnot, coming up in the woods or whatnot. It's like there's next door neighbors for the freaking producer or something like that you record earlier in the day, or later on when Josh disappears and they have his voice out there. They recorded and played on a boombox, so it's like it just echoes all over the place. It sounds fantastic, and just like the chills, the scares, the creepy element of the whole film. It's a wonderful goddamn masterclass of what you don't see is more terrifying than what anything they could show you in the film. Because there was a point in time where they go charging out of the goddamn tent, and they got the cameras rolling and running right behind Heather, where they were supposed to pan the camera over to the left to see someone in an old white garb or whatnot, basically revealing to you that's the Blair Witch running across alongside them, but the shot never happened. They never moved the camera over to show what Heather was pointing at. It works much better not showing it. Just hearing Heather screaming at the top of her lungs like, what the fuck is that? Is more terrifying than showing some guy running around in thermal underwear in grainy 16mm black and white footage. Whatever it would have captured, whatever shape it would have been able to discern in that type of way, probably out of focus, your imagination takes over. What they suggest to you is far more terrifying than anything they ever show you. And they never show you anything in the film. Everything's all suggestion. It's all built on your terror of what you think is out there. Built on the lore that you had set up at the beginning of the film with all the townsfolk, all the little things that Heather's giving out to the audience in that sort of monologue at the beginning of the film. And when you kind of interview all these different people, especially those two guys doing the fishing, the son and then the father-in-law type of thing. Very interesting type of things that get going on to just set the little things up that get you creeped up a little bit under your skin once things start to happen. So goddamn good. So goddamn good. Just everything builds up so beautifully in this whole thing. I just think that film is just terrifying. Again, 21 years later, I sit down and watch this thing, not even in a theater, in this room, with a little bit of surround sound going on. Still terrifying. Just envelops you so goddamn much. I love so much how the whole film just has that building dread. So much so, I mean, when you get up to the climax of this whole film, and they find the goddamn house, and they're following the screams of Josh into the darkness of the night. All these things. With the black and white footage mixed in with the video footage where, again, there was a little bit of a delineation where it's like, every time they pick up the 16mm thing, it was typically to shoot something for the documentary that Heather wants to make. And the video stuff was much more about behind the scenes stuff, the kind of loose type of things to kind of document the journey of what they're on. But as things kind of build up and they have to use both things and kind of build all that type of stuff up, all these things kind of intermingle, and just like all the things between what they want to document as a sort of constructed narrative and the things that are actually happening to them kind of collide in that type of moment. I love so much. So much. Where at the end of the film, you got Mike with the video camera, Heather with the 16mm, but only the video camera picks up the audio. I love so much when after Mike gets hit and taken down, you're at Heather's point of view with the 16mm, but the audio is coming from a different part of the house. It just sounds so haunting in a certain way, just like hearing the voice being distant, but knowing that you're right at the point of view of that same character. It's like it's such a brilliant type of accident they kind of had there, and where it wasn't being recorded on the DAT tape, stuff like that. It's like they even had to go back and reshoot that the next night for certain reasons to get the certain audio, stuff like that. But it's like it just worked out in such an artistic type of way. Just like it works out so well to just create this disjointed sort of atmosphere in the entire situation there. Just like it's a very good type of stuff. Just like there's so much about this film that just gets in on our skin. And again, that Curse of the Blair Witch documentary is a perfect deception. It's perfect in every type of way. Every single actor they got to do interview footage feels like an authentic type of thing. Especially back in the 90s when you saw a lot of this stuff going on, like Unsolved Mysteries or In Search Of or various other things that are going on at the time. It felt extremely authentic. All the fabricated documents, all these different things they had going on. I love the goddamn mystic occurrences part, where they got this Fox footage from this like 1971 sort of documentary series where this guy is like down to the film stock and the color of the film stock. Everything with the guy's dress, all these things, is perfect. Whoever they got to put together this whole thing, it absolutely was perfect. The only thing that was a little bit of a flaw is when they had this little press conference with Russ and Parr. Definitely looks like they shot it on video and put some little film grain filters over the top of that. There's the only part where it doesn't look authentic. Everything else is dead on exact. And that builds up so much the visuals of the actual mythology. And like integrating that with the entire film is so perfect. You need that kind of almost full experience to really get everything you could possibly get out of it, because I love so much they clue that on the DVD and the Blu-ray, so there's not a problem getting this whole thing to kind of experience it alongside the film. Such a good type of thing. It works so well, just have this stuff. I mean, seeing that sketch of the actual Blair Witch creeps the fuck out of me after 21 years. I don't know if it's just me, because I've lived with this film for so long, from back when it was released up to now, these things just creep the fuck out of me. This entire film just creepy as shit. I know there was a lot of backlash. There's a lot of things with this film that afterwards, like, okay, had a massive groundswell from the marketing and the buzz, all that type of stuff. And a lot of people, probably the people who walked out of the film 20 minutes in, had a big backlash towards this type of stuff. Some people probably just waited to the end and then backlashed on it. But there's a lot of stuff that it was a very troubled type of thing afterwards, where it's like massive success, but it has a lot of things going on with the rumblings of, like, a lot of people have just a bad taste in their mouth about it. They didn't like it. They were very angry about the whole film, where it didn't actually kick off anything. It kicked off a bunch of parodies, but no other studios kind of looked at this like, yeah, let's do that. It's dirt cheap. We can come up with a real simple story and just throw some people in the woods and do some random shit and capitalize on it, but no one did that. No one just looked at the Blair Witch and found something else they could milk something off of to kind of copy off of it. No one ever did that. It wasn't until 8 years later they actually got Paranormal Activity developed and kind of put together. But even that didn't get a wide release until 2009. But of course, Artisan wants to make more money. They want to make more money. Of course they want to make more money. It's a huge hit. Cost them basically nothing. And so just over a year later, they released Book of Shadows Blair Witch 2, which is a very interesting, strange, baffling type of film in terms of how it presents its story, because basically this takes place within the continuity that the actual events of the Blair Witch were apparently real, but the film still got released and created this big buzz about different things. So there's this character portrayed by Jeffrey Donovan who hosts all these sort of treks into the forest, the Blair Witch Hunt, and takes all these people in there who are kind of interested and fascinated about it for their own different reasons, and does play with the sort of reality bending type of stuff here and there. But man, this film did not go over well. It really got a critical lambasting. It did terrible business at the box office. Came to us from director Joe Berlinger, who's very much a prolific documentary filmmaker who did fantastic work with his Paradise Lost documentary series about the West Memphis Street, and was very pleased that his work on these documentaries got a lot of attention towards them and helped to get them released from prison after wrongful incarcerations. But despite him doing fantastic work with that, this one just didn't go over well, because Artisan Entertainment took the film away from him in the edit, turned his very linear storyline into a very much a non-linear storyline, where they kind of spliced up all this footage and put it in random parts of the film to make a lot of things not make sense. Reshot a whole bunch of random gore footage in the film to dump it in there, and this weird unknown sort of subplot with Jeffrey Donovan's character that flashing back to when he was in this sort of asylum that really doesn't amount to anything in the course of the film, just kind of there to kind of make him seem like he's responsible for all this weird shit happening in the whole film. Very strange. It doesn't make any sense in the theatrical cut. There's never been a director's cut release for this film, despite Berlinger on his commentary track very heavily talking about all the stuff that he did not want in the film, and they screwed up the entire goddamn thing. Who knows if his actual director's cut got released, if it would be all that much more favorable in terms of how it would go over with critics and all that type of stuff compared to the found footage version of the first film. Just didn't go over well, and Sanchez and Myrick really wanted to do this sort of prequel story about Ellie Kedward. Very much a period piece type of thing, where Artisan just never clicked into it. And Artisan later gets bought up by Lionsgate, stuff like that, and they don't kind of bite onto it either. And so it just kind of goes nowhere after Book of Shadows. Just goes absolutely nowhere until 2016, where we got Adam Wingard, who is responsible for films like The Guest and You're Next. Very powerful, good, well-rounded cult genre films that a lot of people were very much impressed by. He had a very innovative style, kind of blending different things, like he would blend like an action film with a slasher film, stuff like that, and very interesting type of stuff to make sure that this guy seemed like the right guy to kind of come in and do something new and fresh and kind of develop things where they're developing this thing for years ahead of time, in secret. They didn't let anyone get the word out about the whole goddamn thing that they're making a Blair Witch movie. Even in the auditions, they kind of word replaced Blair Witch and Burkittsville and all this type of stuff to make sure it was masked out completely, that no one could get the word out about the whole thing. And they promoted the whole film as a film called The Woods. So they were promoting this whole thing for a long period of time, until 2 months before its release in 2016 at San Diego Comic-Con, where they did the screening and revealed it was Blair Witch. And so you got the buzz going, all that type of stuff. 2 months straight of just like solid buzz. Everyone's getting excited for this thing, just like shut right out the gate. And then failed at the box office and failed a lot with the critics and didn't get a lot of stuff going on to progress the franchise forward. Because in this film, it's back to the kind of style of the original film in terms of being a found footage film, where apparently the brother of Heather finds some suspicious footage thinking that his sister is still alive out there in the Black Hills. And so he comes up with all these friends he has and these other guys who apparently supposedly found footage and whatnot about that stuff in the woods. And they go out there and they do all this type of stuff, and they got all these wonderful HD cameras, all these kind of like head-mounted type of little GoPro type of stuff here and there and stuff like that. So they updated it. They made it more modern and a little sleeker here and there, and used a whole ton of jump scares. A whole ton of jump scares in this whole film, where it was completely different from that style in the first one, where it was all atmospheric and suspenseful and kind of working with what you don't see is more terrifying than what you can see. And I watched the film anticipating for this whole review and everything like that, and I did enjoy it. I thought it had a lot of good things that were very creepy in it. Again, jump scares aside, stuff like that, I thought that there was a lot of good things to credit for the film. There were certainly sequences that were just really terrifying. They really had some good stuff in there. But it didn't progress anything very far. It just felt like a modern update of the original film, and not a whole lot more going on with it. There's not a lot of stuff to push like the mythos forward or anything different with it. So it felt like very safe type of stuff. It has some good things, but some stuff just feels like it's kind of stalled out. It's like you're not moving it anywhere. You've made it more sleeker and updated with HD cameras, but it's like you've kind of almost regressed with the style of horror that you're kind of employing, with everything being loud noises and people jumping out of places here and there, stuff like that. You've kind of regressed in some places, and you really kind of didn't go forward in any other places. So either you're kind of stuck in the same place, or you kind of step back a little bit. So it's like, you can see why a lot of the critics didn't react very strongly to it. You can see why all the fans were very much kind of disappointed in the whole film. It just didn't go anywhere. It just got stuck there with some stuff where it was like, okay, they went ahead and scripted the whole thing out. It was very much different from the first film, so you can definitely feel that it is much more of a scripted type of film with specific dialogue and specific character traits and specific things they wanted to have happen with the interaction of the characters, stuff like that. So it plays with a lot of different things as well, with the sort of manipulation of time and space, and how it's like almost perpetually night out in the forest and stuff like that. So all these different things are like, okay, they played with some stuff and they kind of made it a little bit more of a manageable type of production, that type of way, and just stuff like that. So it's like, it has admirable traits, but also has stuff that you can kind of knock towards it. So it's like, it didn't go far enough, and there's some places where they do show a little too much of what you probably really don't want to have to see. You kind of like having not seeing what's really out there. That works so well, and they just take a few months where they show too many little things here and there. So it's like, it's a very combative type of opinion to have about the film, but again, didn't make money, didn't get anywhere. Like, it cost about $5 million to produce, but they put $20 million into marketing the film, and so when you only get $46 million back, and a third of that kind of goes back, a third to a half of it goes back to the theater owners, you basically made no money on this film. Just bombed, just went nowhere. I'm sure they were expecting similar numbers to the first film, 100 million, 200 million, something like that, really big type of numbers. It's kind of that lightning strike mentality. You can't have it hit again the same way it did the first time. It's such a difficult type of thing to build on that type of thing. I'm sure very creative screenwriters and producers and filmmakers could come up with something that'd be kind of satisfying that type of way, but it's very difficult for people to kind of take all that mythology and kind of build it up and kind of find some other way to do the same thing, but progress it somewhere else and do something interesting that would still also be commercially and critically successful. So it's a very, very difficult thing with this style of found footage to really kind of get that off and deal with Blair Witch in that regard. But the first film's still great. The first film's so excellent. Sitting down and watching it again after so many years, the film just, again, hit off on so many terrifying levels, are just almost as terrifying as they were 21 years ago sitting in the theater. The film holds up, and I think this film just really is worthwhile to revisit, get involved with the atmosphere of it, and get soaked into it so very much. So guys, I want to hear what you guys think about the Blair Witch Project and kind of the entire franchise and stuff like that all together here. So discuss your feelings about all this type of stuff, what you feel about Book of Shadows. If you think there really should be a goddamn director's cut out there, give Brosier his due to release the film that should have been released, even if it wasn't going to be the thing that kind of put everything over the top and get as big of a box office as the first film. As an artistic person, I think he deserves that chance to kind of go back and to present his version of it the way he thought it should have been presented. So much good stuff. So much not as good stuff, but talk about all the stuff, Blair Witch. So thanks so much, guys. There's always a Patreon if you're able to contribute every month to get a little extra access, early access to everything around here. Downloadable archive of all the audio commentaries you've ever done. There's over 90 of them now, and we're getting up on the Saw franchise right now. So guys, thanks so much for watching and supporting things around here. So hope you take care, stay well. Bye-bye.